Well, hello, this is Paul Chek, and welcome back. Today I'm going to begin another little mini-series. This one is a four-part mini-series titled Miraculous Living, a Four-Doctor Approach. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the four qualities of supramental beings. A supramental being is a master that can go beyond the laws of physics and do things like Sai Baba manifesting, or things like Jesus is reported to have done, and a variety of other masters. In this book, which I highly recommend for those of you that really want to understand the life process, karma, and what's really going on here, this is probably the best, most scientific, well-grounded book of all the books that I've read on the soul, which is probably about 100 of them. And the book is called The Physics of the Soul by Amit Goswami. Amit Goswami is a very, very lucid man. He's a theoretical quantum physicist, and he's a very deeply metaphysical man whose teachings are very, very profound and clear, so I highly recommend that. So I'm going to share some concepts with you based on my own interpretation and how it relates to my four-doctor model, so we can take advantage of the four qualities that Amit Goswami quoted in his book in reference to Sri Aurobindo. So he references Sri Aurobindo's observations of all of these masters and found that there was four things that they all were capable of doing, and that all of them had these four abilities. Therefore, if these masters can perform miracles like Jesus walking on water, Buddhist masters that are reported to be able to move through brick walls and all sorts of things, Zen masters that have been reported in many, many instances to be able to stop their hearts die, sometimes for days at a time, and then just turn their hearts back on. There's so much of this information out there that it's, as Goswami alludes to, it's probably not realistic to think that it doesn't happen. And then you got people like Sai Baba that demonstrate it, and I've seen Sai Baba many times on video, and I have a friend of mine who has seen him do this stuff in person. So there's too much evidence that this can be done for us to ignore it if you really want to achieve your abilities to create the life that you want. So on the board here I've listed a model that is fairly well researched and scientifically accepted, though most Newtonian scientific thinkers don't even read this kind of research because they don't want to find out that they're wrong. But there's plenty of research, so some authors that you could look into that quote and give or have produced science on this is Deepak Chopra, Amit Goswami, William A. Tiller has done extremely advanced investigations into subtle energy, chakras and all that, Valerie Hunt, and Cynthia Dale, the Encyclopedia of Subtle Energy Anatomy, for example. Those are just a few. In those books you'll find piles of references. Also Claude Swanson's book, Life Force. Phenomenal. Very technical, very deep, but phenomenal research, loaded with stuff most people are completely unaware of. So what we want to do is look at the model real quickly. Prime source, the source of all, which Christians, Muslims, and people of Jewish faith would refer to as God, for example, or what a Buddhist would refer to as the ground of being, or what Stephen Hawking would call zero, or what most quantum physicists would call the zero-point field, is also referred to as unconditional love, that without condition but pure potential. Zero is that without condition but has pure potential. This also represents, in my model, consciousness in caps versus conscious of. If you're listening to me right now, you're conscious of, but it's only because you're conscious that you can be conscious of. So the soul represents the causal body. This is the beginning of what's called individuated wholeness. So the soul represents the wholeness of unconditional love, but it is individuated so that it can have an individual experience. Now, how these things come about, you can learn about in this book, which is quite comprehensive, and other resources I've suggested. It's too detailed for me to get into here, and a lot of people would find it hard to understand. The soul moves into higher mind. The higher mind is the realm of archetypes. Context. An archetype is a context. So the warrior archetype is the context of self-expression, which includes all things warrior. The lover archetype is the context in which Source expresses its perfection as a lover. If you also look at pure ideas, you could go back to Plato's concepts of things like good, beauty, and truth. So this is where zero expresses its energies in potentiation. So just like the sun radiates in every direction, and we have north, south, east, and west, here you could think of the cycle of the zodiac and the 12 constellations of the zodiac and each of the symbols, Leo, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, etc., as different forms of energies, all of which influence different human beings. Well, higher mind is where archetypes or pure forms are that serve as attractors. In other words, no matter how great a lover you are, there's always something inside of you that inspires you to be better. That is the draw of the perfected form called an archetype. Those are the things that guide and govern our ego mind, or our lower mind, where we are programmed into social ideas, cultural ideas, family ideas, religious ideas, things that we essentially have to conform to live in the matrix within which we exist. So here we are at the level of intellectual programming. This goes, and this is where the ego is formed. The individual. We're not all the same lover. We all may go to the same church, but we actually might practice. If you have 10 people at a Christian church, if you were to study them, you'd find that they practice Christianity 10 different ways. That's what an ego does. Then we go to the vital or etheric body, which is the energetic imprint that informs. It's the information of individuation informing. To inform means to guide and direct. So this information meets the physical body and informs it. The Taoist monks demonstrated 900 years ago that shortly after the sperm met the egg, the energy bodies and the acupuncture meridians all appeared before the fetus began to go into mitosis or cell division. And that was only recently demonstrated scientifically, and people used to laugh at these people and say they were idiots and all sorts of weird stuff, just like they did with acupuncture. So the point is, this concept of the vital field and information has been known by seers and sages and shamans and medicine men for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So don't get caught in the trap of thinking if it's not proved by science, it's not real, because scientists, even quantum physicists, have said, I remember Archibald Wheeler said, I'm sure at any time at the end of one of my mathematical equations I'm going to find a rishi sitting with crossed legs, which means everything he's trying to prove with modern science was already known by ancient masters, and they're just trying to figure out how they knew it. So these concepts are fairly logical if you just look at them, and anyone that practices doesn't need science. You find out right away. Then you have the physical body, which is the materialization, matter realization. This is where all of this takes action. Thoughts and words express themselves as deeds through your body mind to give you an individual experience in which you forget about the fact that you are all this, which makes it fun in the long run. Because if you know everything, there's nothing to learn, nothing to do. So this is called drinking from the river of forgetfulness in metaphysics. Once you dive into the river of forgetfulness, you forget that you're God, metaphorically, and the journey of life is figuring that out. That's the fun part. Enlightenment means, I get it, and now I will treat all of you as though you are God because I know it's true. So with the model in place, the first of the abilities, skills, or powers that Aurobindo recognized in all the masters was the power to transform the negative to the positive. To transform a negative to a positive or a positive to a negative means to convert polarity, to make energy move in either direction. That relates to doctor movement in my four-doctor model. Anytime you're moving, you're converting one form of energy to the other. Gravity is converted to kinetic energy. Inhalation is converted to exhalation. Up's converted to down. internal energy accumulation converted to external energy spending. So anything that moves is in a state of energy conversion or transformation. So movement in my system, Dr. Movement, deals with movement of mind, movement of motion, and movement of body. So what are some tips that you can use to practice transforming the negative to positive in your own life? One, question your thoughts. Most of our thoughts are dangerously wrong. I think Deepak Chopra has cited research that showed the average person thinks 68,000 thoughts a day, of which 90% are negative in orientation. So to be like a master and access your supramental ability, to access your pure forms, pure context, and be truly in touch with the divine or universal intention, we have to be able to look beyond our stinking thinking and look at thoughts holistically, which requires a level of honesty and bravery, because the ego typically does not like to find out that it was wrong, which is why our education systems are all screwed up. Okay, so question your thoughts. What thoughts are dream affirmative? If you have thoughts that go against what your dream is, then you're creating what you do not want. Remember, it does not take any more energy to create what you do want than it does what you don't want. It doesn't take any more energy to walk down the aisle in the supermarket that has organic food than the one that has all the boxed, genetically modified garbage. It's just a choice. So, in my Primal Pattern Eating webinar, which you can get as an audio recording with handout, I teach techniques for connecting to your soul so you can learn to connect to your soul. I also teach techniques for using muscle testing to ask questions and get answers that go beyond the ego self. So there you can learn how to feed yourself and practice using these supramental concepts or soul concepts in an environment that's not so threatening to the ego. In other words, should I have this piece of chicken or not is a lot better than should I marry or should I get a divorce. Practice with the little stuff. Recognize your creative power. Don't want and fear ideas are antagonistic to do want and the concept of possibility. So the more you're telling yourself don't want, can't have, wouldn't, shouldn't, coulda, didn't, but, the more you're locking yourself into your ego and fixating yourself and creating a rigid mental structure. Rigid things eventually snap. Masters are highly adaptable to any situation and any type of person, regardless of race, creed, or color. 3, don't make the same mistakes over and over again. Osho said quite beautifully, there's no such thing as a sin except making the same mistake that you knew didn't work last time. My father used to say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So if you want to access your power to convert the negative to the positive, you have to stay in a state of awareness and be honest with yourself about what worked last time and what didn't work and why, so you can be aware of how to modify your inner world and your relationships so that you don't step in the shit twice or 3 times or 1,000 times. Art therapy, I find extremely helpful. I've studied it for years and practiced it for years, and I think it's one of the most medicinal things I've ever done. Simple technique. If you're angry or frustrated or having a challenge in a relationship, take out a piece of art paper, get some colorful pens or pencils, and draw exactly how you feel. If you feel like, draw it. Put a circle on the page, a mandala, draw the stress in the paint. Let it sit for a while. Calm yourself down. Do some breathing. Be brave enough to look past the seemingly obvious into the subtle. And when you can come back and look at that and create something beautiful out of it by adding, changing colors, painting over, whatever, that teaches you the art of converting a negative to a positive in a very, very safe, controlled environment where there's nobody there to threaten you or challenge you except you. And I found through my own practice that the more I practice at doing it on paper as art, the quicker I could do it inside of myself, in my heart, and in my head. And finally, mentors. a lot of these things, most of us are so ingrained in our old habit pathways, it's hard for us to do anything other than intellectualize, and we can become one of these talking heads that says, I know, I know, I know, and the rest of us are looking at them going, well, if you know, then why has nothing changed? And as a teacher, I can tell you two of the words that I enjoy hearing the least are I know, because usually the more a person says I know, the less they know. That's the disease of thinking that just because you're a parrot, you actually know it. You know it when you're doing it. So we want to take advantage of the fact that there are mentors out there. Chek instructors are highly skilled people. They can be mentors. Whoever has demonstrated honest, objective progress in the area that you want to grow in is a mentor for you. And I would highly recommend when you find a mentor that you not only seek their help, but you behave like an Eastern student, not a Western student, who tends to sit there and just argue with the teacher all day long and try to be a wise ass and ultimately waste a lot of good time. If you're wise enough to choose a mentor, be wise enough to remember you have one mouth and two ears, which means you're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk in the presence of a mentor. Very important. All right, those are my little tips on how to apply the power of transforming the negative to the positive, which relates to doctor and movement, so that you can have miraculous living with your 4 doctors. My next one will be on quality number 2 and the doctor that it correlates with, and we will continue through all 4 qualities so you have exactly what you need to live miraculously like I do here in heaven. See you soon.